Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us at this Your Overseas Home webinar, whether you're watching us live or you're catching up on demand. My name is Christopher Nye. I'm the Senior Content Editor at Your Overseas Home and Spain Property Guides. And today I will be chatting with Emma Belgum from JLCA and Associates Lawyers, all about inheritance when buying a property in Spain. Now, if you have a question, please type it into the questions tab on the right-hand side of your screen. And of course, if you want to share this with family and friends, a replay, or you want to watch it yourself later, a replay is available to watch on the Your Overseas Home website. Now, so let's start off. Emma, it would be great if you could please start by giving us a summary of who you are and what and how JLCA can help our viewers today.
Hi, thanks very much, Chris. Well, basically, JLCA Lawyers, we're a Spanish legal firm. We've been established for over 20 years. I myself have been working here for 13 years. We are specifically a Spanish law firm. We practice Spanish law only, but we have offices in Spain, the UK, and the US. The main point to bring to attention is that we are a multilingual office, so we are able not only to be able to provide support in terms of translation of what's happening, but also interpretation from a more native local level. As an aside, we don't just deal with extrajudicial work, inheritance and such, and conveyancing. We do also have full civil and criminal departments, so we cover all areas of law. Obviously, the object and the subject of today's webinar is the inheritance process in Spain. It is a very, very different process to that you would be used to in the UK. And to start off with, it's important to understand that although in the UK it often isn't necessary to complete an inheritance or probate, in Spain, where there is a death in the family and assets are involved, it is always required in order to transfer the ownership into the name of the heirs. Now, the process itself is quite complicated in the number of steps, but it is something that we've been doing for many years. So I'll just summarize what these basic steps are, just to give you an idea of the process. The first thing is to obtain a copy of the death certificate so that we can then apply for the certificate of last wills. Here in Spain, there's a registry of wills where all of them are kept. So with that death certificate, we will apply for that, and it confirms if there is a will in place or not. And at the same time, we can also check if the person had any life insurance policies in place, which is of course important because we can use that money then to release and help with the process itself. Once we have done that, we can then, if there is a will, apply for a copy of that last will for the heirs, or if not, and there's a probate process, then we'll go through that so that we can have the appropriate information to show who are the legal heirs so that we can go on to the next steps. The next steps would be a full inventory of the actual inherited estate itself. We have to make sure that all of the heirs have NIE numbers, as in the equivalent of a national insurance number in Spain. And with all of these documents in place, we can then arrange the actual deed of inheritance, which is signed at a notary office. Once this is done, we can then arrange payment of all of the taxes that need to be liquidated, and block all of the bank accounts and such that would have been frozen during the course, and re-register the property in the property registry of Spain. That then leaves us able to set up everything as direct debits in the name of the heirs and allow you to continue with whatever you wish to do with the property. As I say, it's quite a lot of information that I've just rattled through, but it is an important process, and it does need to be done carefully. And it's our policy to detail everything and explain each steps, but we hold your hand all the way through so that you know exactly what's happening at each stage, and each of the points of notarization and legalizing documents we're able to help you with to make it. I mean, it's a horrible situation to be in, but we try to make it as simple as possible. Chris, I mean, I don't know if you've got any questions in terms of.
I've got questions. I've got questions. Don't you worry. So firstly, we have questions coming in from the audience. But I'm going to ask a few first as well. Now, so the first thing, if you're buying in Spain, when should we start thinking about inheritance? I mean, I would have thought it's the kind of thing I would think about when I've settled in and I've been there for a couple of years, but I would imagine one should think about it earlier than that.
It really depends on the person. I mean, it's a horrible subject to be thinking of always, but we always recommend that a person, when they are buying a property in Spain, that they make a Spanish will. The reason that we recommend doing that is because it has to be re-registered in Spain, obviously, and has to go through the process here. But having a Spanish will in place means that it can be done a lot quicker and actually cheaper than having to process a will from the UK. Now, in terms of whether you want to plan way ahead of that and think about it, it depends. If you're thinking in terms of what inheritance taxes and such that family members might have, whether you're deciding whether you're going to put two names on a deed or one name on a deed, and then we can talk specifically with the client about what the different options are, what the implications are, so that they can make that planning before purchasing if they wish.
Muted. Okay, good. So I'm just if I look distracted, it's because I'm looking at the questions at the same
That's
at the
fine.
same time. Okay, so one thing that one big difference with inheritance in Spain and in the UK is the concept of enforced heirship. So tell us about that.
Okay, a lot of people will obviously understand or have heard that the heirs in Spain, Europe is different to the usual setup in the UK, which is true. And there is European law stating about residence in Spain or property in Spain, and people are worried about whether it will be set up in that way because it varies between the autonomous regions. But effectively, for example, you'll be looking at a third of the property would go to the spouse, a third of the property split between the children, a third of the property could be divided up. But in actual fact, this is another reason that we say it's really important for British people to make a will in Spain, is that we put in a clause there, and you can specifically say in that will that I wish to use the law of my citizenship, which is British law, and then you can apply the heirs as you wish to, as you normally would do in the UK. So the standard setup here, when we arrange for wills for people, is for a married couple that it goes to the spouse, or if they wanted it to go to the children, whichever way they wanted to set it up, we would then set it up that way. And there's no problem with doing that.
Okay, and if you don't do that, if you just sort of leave it to Spanish law, then what would happen when you die?
Again, because of having British status, then it would be a case of checking if there's not a will in Spain, is there a will in the UK, and then evaluating whether it would be going through British law and declaring the heirs from that, which we've done before, where we have a British will, we have probate to show who those heirs are, that is certified, and then we can bring it over to Spain to apply here.
Okay. So tell us about inheritance tax. What sort of will there be inheritance tax firstly, and what sort of levels are we talking about?
This is not an easy question to answer because it's very, very dependent on every situation. Yes, there is always inheritance tax, even if it's zero, and it has to be presented. Each of the autonomous regions has different regulations that apply to inheritance. So, and it also applies for different members of the family. For example, the most relief on tax is direct family children. And then a niece or a nephew would come in a different group, which has a different set of taxes attached to it. So first of all, you've got that side of things. Then you've got, in some regions, there's different relief that you get. For example, in the Costa Blanca, 100,000 euros per son, daughter allowance on their part of the inheritance, and then there's another percentage of reduction of half on the taxes that would be applied. In Andalusia, it's €1,000,000. So each of the regions have got different rules that apply. So it's a case of calculating specifically what would be the division depending on the relationship, the autonomous area, and the value that is actually going to be applied, which is then the cadastral value of the property, the not the perceived market value or deed price, but what is registered within the local town hall as the value of the property. And only on the percentage that's inherited as well, which is an important point. For example, if you have, a couple that own a property, they effectively own 50% each. So if one passed away, then the inheritance is on that 50% that has been inherited only.
Okay, sure. Is there a deadline for when that has to be paid, the inheritance tax?
There's a deadline of 6 months from when somebody passes away as to when you should start the process, register the process. It doesn't mean that it can't be done afterwards. It just means that the taxes increment a little bit if they are applicable.
Okay. Okay. Now, there's all sorts of different situations, and one of them is that a lot of our viewers, I think buying in Spain tends to be something that you do often on a second marriage or a second relationship. Certainly, that's what we find. And so I'm wondering about people who aren't married. What happens if you're not married? Do you have to set up the purchase in a different way to start off with?
In terms of the purchase itself, you're buying as individual people, not as a couple. I mean, so if you've got a couple that are unmarried that are buying a property, they will each own 50%.
Right.
So then, how they wish to pass their 50%. Again, we would say it's important to have a Spanish will in place to make sure that you've named exactly what you want to happen to your 50%.
Okay, so suppose suppose I'm not married, but I've got children from a previous marriage, say, and we're buying a property in Spain, and I want my spouse to be able to continue living there, but I also want my children's interests to be protected too. Is there a structure that one would put together that would allow that to happen?
Yes, I mean, from the one point of view, it depends on obviously everybody's relationship. If they're just happy to set that out and know that that will be honoured, or what you can do is, for example, if have your will to set out that your wife partner has a lifetime use on the property, but the actual ownership goes to the children.
Okay, right. What about other aspects of inheritance that other than property? So, what happens with all one's possessions? And I know we were doing one of these in France, and they can come in and the authorities can come in and count everything and value everything. What happens with all your your wealth?
Generally, it would be included as and assumed within the normal inheritance. If you've got things of specific value, then it's recommended that you would specifically put it in the will.
Right.
If there was a contentious situation where there are assets that haven't been accounted for and can't be dealt with between the family themselves, that they're not happy to resolve it between themselves, then what would normally happen then is a valuation would be done on that, and it would be divided equally between the heirs according to the will.
Okay. Right. Okay. And what about different parts of Spain? Are there different parts? Are the rules different in different parts of Spain?
The only part that's different is in terms of how the taxes are applied. The actual process itself is the same across Spain.
And what is it? So I suppose our two main areas are Andalusia and Valencia. Would it be Costa Blanca? So what is there any benefit to being in one or the other?
Oh, these at the end of the day is down to the person, because there's differences in each autonomous region in terms of what the tax benefits are. Andalusia at this point has a higher relief for direct family members in terms of inheritance tax. it's 1 million in Costa Blanca against 100,000 in Costa del Sol, as opposed to 100,000 in Comunidad Valenciana. Whereas what you've then got to look at is how far that actually goes, because if you've got a property of 200,000 euros and you have two children that they each have 100,000, so that would effectively be zero. Obviously, with 1 million, you could have a much higher property to be in that same situation. The difference then being in the purchase part, because properties in the Costa del Sol tend to cost more than the equivalent of Costa Blanca when you're buying in the first place. So all of these things, it's just down to the individual about which areas they really like, and then making the best planning according to what the regulations are there.
Okay. Just take us through the process of actually making a will. Where does one go? Where do we go? Does it have to be notarized? What does it cost?
Okay.
So,
No, absolutely. It does need to be notarized. We offer services exactly for that, for preparing a Spanish will. It's a pretty simple process from our point of view, because we can make all the arrangements for the actual drafting of the will by email, by telephone, by Zoom calls. But the actual physical will itself does need to be signed by the person at the notary in Spain. So it would be a case of arranging having everything ready, having the notary appointment booked then, so that you can just, when you're out next on your holiday, pop in. It's over and done with within an hour or so, and you just sign. And notary fees here in Spain are typically sort of 70 to 90 euros for notarizing. And then once we've done that, we will inscribe it in the registry of wills.
okay. Now we've had some questions here. Sebastian has asked, can wills be contested in Spain if a beneficiary, such as a child, is excluded?
It's the same situation as the UK. It's always possible to contest a will, and it's just it's a court process. So if somebody wants to contest a will, then they can go through, but it obviously needs to be demonstrated why they wish to contest it, and it would go through a court process to decide whether that is justified or not.
And does that often happen? I mean, when you've
No.
got no, okay.
It's not common. As I say, the majority of time, if somebody has specifically set out a will for how they want things done, and then the wishes have to be respected. There are situations which are unusual and difficult, and yes, we have dealt with this before, but it's not what I would say common.
Okay. David has asked, do you need two wills, one UK and one Spain, or do you just have one?
As I say, it tends to be better to have a will specifically covering the country where you have assets. So I think most people tend to have one in the UK and one in Spain if they've got assets in both countries. It just makes life easier in both countries. I mean, the documentation can be passed between the two with the Hague Apostille. Obviously, we have that for legalization, but having everything correctly for the UK and correctly for Spain just makes things a lot quicker and easier.
Okay. Now, you mentioned earlier, before we came on air, that you just had a client in the States. Is it the same rules basically for other countries, or are there any countries where things are particularly problematic or different?
No, not at all. I mean, the process is the same always that we go through. All of those steps are exactly the same as I would be describing to somebody from the US, from Canada, from Australia. Um, uh,
Okay. Sandra has asked a question. If you own property, if you own UK property as well as Spanish property, and you have a UK and Spanish will, how is inheritance tax calculated?
you would be taxed on the UK for your UK assets. You'd be taxed in Spain on your Spain assets. There isn't, obviously there's protection on double taxation. The only way issue that you tend to have, and this is a conversation I've had with somebody quite recently. For example, if you live in Spain and you inherited a property or money from the UK, then it would then become part of your income in Spain, if that makes sense. And as a resident in Spain, you do pay resident tax. So you're not paying tax on the inheritance that you've had, but you are paying more in your income tax because you have more income.
Okay. Okay. Sure.
And I think that's sort of reflective on other countries as well.
Yes. Okay. Fran has asked a question. Can we buy a property with our children as joint owners? And what would be the inheritance tax implications in Mallorca?
Um, Again, the situation is that if you have 4 people on the deed, then the 4 people own 25%, and if somebody passes away, that 25% has got to be adjudicated to each of those, um, depending on the price of the property and the relationship between each of those. There are applications of tax and reductions in tax. So it's a case of actually physically calculating it for them in that specific case. But all you're talking about there is that you're having more inheritance processes. If you
Yes.
see, so you'd have, because you've got 4 people, then if one person passed away, that quota then gets divided up according to the will, normally to the other 3 people. Those 3 people will then have that. If one of those passed away, that amount would then be to them. Each time it is a full process.
Okay. Just looking at that example and sort of moving away from inheritance just for a second. Are you finding that people do that they buy as a family, or does it just tend to be I guess the mother and father?
Yeah, the parent couple are normally the ones that purchase the property.
And if they don't, if they do divide it into as a four, and alternatively, if it's 4 friends all buying together, how would you say is the best way to structure that?
4 friends buying together.
Yes,
Um,
or
it's
or, or 4 siblings, say.
If to say it entirely is again dependent on what they want to do. If 4 siblings wanted to purchase a property, they'd all normally do it as owning a quarter each, and then they decide how they wish for their part of the property to pass um, upon their death. It depends on what they want to do. I mean, it's a very specific question as to what are they trying to achieve with that.
Yes. Yeah. Okay. Because it seems a very good way of sort of passing wealth through the family. We've got a situation where a lot of people can't afford to buy in the UK, and then you got the mother and the father with the big family house. And I think I've seen people as a way of giving a sort of a living inheritance to the children. Well, they'll buy a property in Spain which everyone can enjoy, and then they can all enjoy it when they're alive together. So it seems like a good option.
No, obviously, in terms of when you're purchasing a property, I mean, it is, if we're talking about the parents, just to say parents, 4 children, parents buying the property in their name and then leaving it to the 4 children afterwards, or you're
Yeah.
talking, yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's something that we see a lot of here, because the whole family gets to enjoy the property during their lifetime. And
Yes.
sharing in that, and then there's a legacy where they are receiving something later on. It's enjoy it now and then you get the money from it later on, or continue with it. This is the thing.
Yes. Absolutely. Um, okay. Sorry. Question from Martin. Probate in the UK can be very drawn out. Recently, it's taken 18 months from the date of death to obtain probate. Is there a similar process in Spain, and is it as long drawn out?
This is one of the reasons that we say it's better to do a Spanish will. The issue is what we've sort of mentioned before. You can go through probate in Spain, but that's under the Spanish heirs law, which isn't necessarily what you would want to do. So you may want to actually use UK probate in order to declare who those heirs are. So it depends on on their situation in that respect. Because let's
Okay.
say you could be relying on that UK probate if you wanted it to be divided according to UK probate as opposed to Spanish.
Okay. Um, is there any benefit in being an EU citizen in the whole issue of inheritance, whether in taxes or processing? Because I know a lot of us are considering getting an Irish passport if we can. Is there an inheritance benefit there?
For inheritance, it isn't so important. It is a lot of people are doing Irish passports, so I'm aware of this. This is a massive benefit for people looking for residency.
Yes. Okay, but it doesn't make any difference with the legal
No,
processes afterwards.
no.
Okay. I suppose basically, kind of to wrap up the inheritance element, unless we get any more questions. What is the how can I make it as simple and painless for my kids as possible when I'm no longer here?
We would definitely say make a Spanish will, have everything set out clearly in your Spanish will, and that way everything you're reducing the problems for those that are left behind. It's as simple as that. Getting hold of a Spanish will is a formal process here. It's not a case of needing to because it's registered in the registry of wills. So as soon as a person has passed away, we have the death certificate. We can apply for a copy of the will. So it's a very quick and easy process then to get things going. So that's the most important thing I would say.
Okay. We have had another question from Sandra. We have a UK property and currently are not looking to get a Spanish residency, but we are considering buying a holiday home in Spain
Mhm.
and may move out permanently later. I think that's true of lots of people actually, Sandra. It's a very good plan. We have no intention of renting either property out when we're not there. How will this affect? Let's move down the page. Another question coming. How will this affect inheritance tax?
Um, won't affect the inheritance tax, because inheritance tax is purely based on the property itself, whether you're resident or non-resident. Again, as we say, setting up a Spanish will just means that that's all set up. But residency or non-residency doesn't make any difference to the inheritance process itself.
Okay. Question from Sebastian. If a property is worth over €500,000 and it goes to a child, would that mean they could apply for a golden visa?
If they have an asset of 500,000 plus all the rest of the requisites, when it's adjudicated to them, yes, they would be able to, because they would be an owner of 500,000. But obviously, there's the rest of the prerequisites for the visa itself. You still have to cover sufficient means, medical cover, etc. But yes, acquiring a property that way would be fine.
Okay. Well, as we have some time, why don't you just remind us what those sufficient means are to go and live in Spain? Firstly, on the kind of the regular retirement visa, and secondly, the golden visa.
Okay, the sufficient means is a basis of IPREM, the public index. It works out per applicant at around about €27,500 for the applicant. That is the same per applicant. If you've got a family unit, then there's the reductions for each of the ones that are attached to that. So 400% comes out at 27,000, just over 27,000. Adding one person to that is around about €35,000, and the same addition for each family member of that. Now that is the same for a golden visa and a non-lucrative visa. The difference between the two then is with the golden visa, you additionally need to purchase a property, 500,000 minimum, clear of any encumbrance or mortgage. The difference between the two visas then is that the non-lucrative visa, you have to be in Spain for a minimum of 183 days per year, and it does not give you the ability to work in Spain or study in Spain. Whereas the golden visa is 1 day requirement in Spain. Obviously, you can stay as long as you wish. Up until 183 days, it allows you the residency within Europe as a Spanish resident, but you don't have to be fiscally resident at that point over 183 days, that you would then become fiscally resident. So basically.
Okay. It's quite a lot, isn't it? 27,000. I mean, people have always chosen to go to Spain. It's a bit of a cliche, but it's true because it's an affordable choice. It gives you an affordable cost of living and so on. In Portugal, I think it's only about 9,000. It's way less. Is there any reason why it's so high, and is there any sign that it might come down a bit?
Not at the moment. I mean, it's something that was set up based on normal spending and average incomes in Spain. There is, I mean, you mentioned earlier about people getting a Irish passport or European passport. The amount that is required on those is less. It's more like €6,000 for the applicant as a European citizen. So this is a fallback position for non-European countries. So it's not just people from the UK. This is what is expected from the US and other non-EU countries as well. So we don't know any changes. The main changes we're waiting for at the moment is the digital nomad visa, which is going to be designed for people wanting to telework from Spain effectively. We're waiting for those details, but we're expecting that there's going to be a minimum means requirement fairly similar.
Yes, in fact, we've got a newsletter going out today that has an article about the new digital nomad visa, which is going to be very, very interesting for our viewers. Although I believe it's only going to last a year or so, or even less. I think it's 5 months. The one that I've seen.
Nothing has actually been formally said with it yet. They haven't even issued what the guidelines are. And we talk to the consulate about it frequently because we've got a lot of people that are waiting to see what happens, because effectively the non-lucrative visa is sort of sitting on that bridge and has been the application people have used for this previously. And until the guidelines are issued, then there's nothing much that we can say about it. We need to know what they're going to be, and then when they start actually rolling out the application, it hasn't been done and they haven't given a date yet.
Okay, now we used to find that we used to have people just used to go to Spain all the time, just go and live there, and decide if they wanted to stay and be a bit quite relaxed about getting residency and getting on the the Padron, all that. And now people have to be much more organized. Are you seeing lots of people coming out? Are the processes quite simple on a scale of, when you're in a pain, the doctor says rate the pain from 1 to 10. How do you rate the pain of the bureaucracy of moving to Spain to retire right now?
The biggest issue is what's happened because of Brexit. So yes, you need to plan ahead. You can't just come here and do that now. From Spain, yes, you can apply for a golden visa. You can apply for European visas, but the most common, the non-lucrative, has to be applied for from the UK, and you get approval before you come to Spain.
Okay.
So again, it's bureaucracy. There's a lot more steps to go through, but if you've got prior planning and prior information, then there's no reason that it can't go through just as smoothly. But we do say prior planning is very important. It's very good for me and my colleagues to talk to people when they're talking about the whole scenario, buying, when they're wanting to buy, whether they're going to rent over here, what their plans are for the future, because then you can start thinking about all of the different processes and which stages you want to do each part to make sure that it all goes really smoothly and exactly the way you want it to go.
Okay. And in terms of organizing yourself, would you say if you're going to try and retire to Spain and you're not 100% sure that you'll get it, maybe your income is a little bit sort of 25,000, say, and you're hoping that you can do it, presumably one shouldn't be buying the property first. You should be speaking to you first and getting a really good assessment of whether you're going to get that visa in the end.
If you're concerned about whether you're going to meet the requirements, then there's no reason not to have a good chat and go through all of those things, because if you've got the ability to go there, or is the idea of a holiday home still appealing, because then there's no reason not to. It doesn't affect the actual application itself having a property. You can rent in Spain, or you can have a property in Spain for the non-lucrative visa. That doesn't matter. It's all about just your own confidence and knowing that you'll be able to do what you want to do.
Okay, and for the holiday home buyers, just take us through the basic buying process. We had some feedback from a survey that people just still don't really know how to buy in Spain, the process. So perhaps you could just give us a sort of a quick précis of how long it takes and
Okay.
the processes.
The sort of quick quick process. Effectively, you found a property that you like and you've made an offer which has been accepted. Quite typically, you'll be asked for a holding deposit to take it off the market. This is anywhere between 3,000 and 6,000 euros normally. Um, we would definitely say that you need to engage independent lawyers at this point, whether it's us or another firm, but independent lawyers to make sure that they're working on your behalf, because this is the point then that we would be checking all of the paperwork for the property to make sure it's in the name of the person selling, that all of the different paperwork is in order. We'll check there's no infractions with the town hall, that it has habitation certificates, all of these sorts of things. It's important because the next stage is the private purchase contract or deposit contract. And normally you would sign this with a larger deposit, usually about 10%. And the clauses that were within that contract are binding to notary. So if there is a requirement for the seller to get a particular piece of paperwork in order beforehand, we need to make sure it's in that contract so that it is done beforehand. And if there is a problem, you're able then to cancel the sale legally and get your money back if there's a problem. Assuming everything's all gone forward, we move towards signing at the notary, which is the final signing. This is something that we can do by power of attorney, quite frequently we do for our clients. And following that, it's inscribed at notary. And then once it's in your name, you're able to, we are able on your behalf to change all of the direct debits for you, get it set up in your own bank account so that everything is all ready for you to start using. It is important though, if you are planning to use your property for investment, for renting out on a weekly basis, daily basis, summer tourism, there is a process that needs to go through, and you do need to have a tourist license for the property, and that's something that we can check that the property that you've got is able to be used for that purpose. The majority of cases on the coast, it isn't an issue, but it's something that we can double check just to make sure that you're able to do what you want to do with it.
Yes, it's one of those things that people think, oh, we'll rent it out for a bit, and then you finally got to get your tourist license. You've got to have signs all over the place. You've got to have all the electrical equipment set. Explain the basic things that you have to do, and the cost of getting that holiday home rental license.
Actually doing the license, it is only a matter of a few hundred euros. It's not huge. It's not a huge investment. It's not thousands at all. And the process is going through it. As I say, it depends. If you're doing a long-term rental, you don't need to do the same tourist license. If you're doing high season peak, week rentals. If Airbnb, for example, if you're renting a property through them, they will ask for your tourist license. And it's a case of making sure that there's nothing within the community to say that you cannot have that kind of licensing through the local town authorities, that they have the agreements in place that you are able to do so. So it's just an administrative process of going through, and we can check if it is possible, if that particular area does allow it. And if it's not, then obviously you need to rethink your plans if it is based on purely on rental. The majority of places say if you're looking at a place that is a tourist region for doing these weekly ones, and normally it isn't too much of an issue.
Yeah, I know Fran, who asked the question earlier, was buying in Mallorca, and I know that there's been issues in Mallorca because all the property that was rented out long term has now been, everyone's thinking, actually I'd make more money doing it short term, and so they put in rules about, no, this can only be long term let. This can be a
it's important to check with each of them. We would always say it's important to check if that's your intention.
And in terms of the long term let, how difficult it is being a landlord in Spain, because that's what effectively you are. You think you're buying a property and you're renting it out, and that makes you a landlord, and you then become at risk of difficult tenants that won't move out. How difficult is it, would you say, being a landlord in Spain?
It's very much the same as the UK. You can set it up where you're managing it yourself, take more risks as such. You can use management companies for it. They will do certain checks for you to try and make sure that doesn't happen. Occasionally, obviously, the worst can happen, and there are processes for getting houses back. Eviction processes, obviously, that can be done here. But say a lot of it is very similar to what you'd expect in the UK.
We're going through the process at the moment. I tried to sell my wife's flat, and we can't get the tenants out, and it's a massive problem, causing us huge stress. And I think the important thing is to know from the start, you're not just renting out your wife's property until you can sell it. You are a landlord, and you have responsibilities, and as do your tenants. They have rights. So it's best to be business-like and legal from the
very
start.
important, very important to make sure, as I say in the UK as well, that you've got a good contract that is correct and legal for the purposes. Make sure everything's properly tied down in that contract. Obviously, you do a certain amount of checks on a person that they provide before they take a long-term rental with you. And this is saying, in principle, you shouldn't have any problems. The worst can happen sometimes, as you said. There are eviction processes that can be enacted here as well.
Okay. We're running towards the end of our time together, but we've got a question from Sebastian. If one person has an EU passport and their partner doesn't hold one, what is the minimum income requirement then?
Okay, are they married? Is the question. Because
Let's do both.
okay,
Let's say they are.
if they are married, then the person with the EU passport can apply as a European member, and the spouse can be attached as part of the family, meaning that you will have European residency in Spain. If you are not married or don't have any kind of civil partnership, then they would have to be done separately. One could get the EU, the other one would need to do non-lucrative.
Got it. Okay. Well, they are married, so that's nice. Okay.
Recommendation would be the European route in that case, then, because that gives you much more flexibility and a lot less requirement in the for the means.
Okay, great. Well, that's all the questions we've got. But if people do have any more questions, your contact details are there, and we would really, I really would recommend that you get in touch with JLCA and Emma directly to discuss your requirements in detail. Thank you for viewing this session. We wish you all the best in your move overseas. Now we do have lots of resources at Your Overseas Home and also at Property Guides, Spain Property Guides, and to help you, including other webinars, including with Emma. And I would also like to invite you to register for our virtual event, which is coming up on the 12th of November, which seemed like a long way away, but is rushing towards us quite quickly. It's a day where you can gather all the information that you need and meet the advisors and the estate agents and see wonderful properties. And you can look at the property on one screen and you can be talking, having it open. You can go on Google and look at the street while talking to the agent. So it's just like your first viewing trip, really. All from the comfort of your own sofa on a Saturday in November. So do register on the button there. So thank you once again to Emma. Thank you for JLCA and happy property hunting. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Chris.
Thank you.